Chapter 3 of the book, How to Respond to the Lodge, is titled Organization and Structure of the Lodge. Its first lines inform us that
Freemasonry, dating from 1717 AD, is represented in the United States by the Blue Lodge of these basic degrees: Entered Apprentice, Fellow Craft, and Master Mason. Beyond the Blue Lodge, the Master Mason may choose one of two paths to follow, or he may choose neither. The two paths are Scottish Rite and American Rite, sometimes called York Rite. The Scottish Rite has 30 degrees beyond the Blue Lodge, the last of which is the 33rd degree, a strictly honorary award. There are 10 degrees beyond the Blue Lodge in the York Rite, culminating in the Knight Templar degree, the equivalent of the 32nd degree in the Scottish Rite. The first 3 degrees of the Blue Lodge are the only essential degrees through which all Masons must pass. All other degrees are optional.
But then, while explaining the structural arrangement of Freemasonry, the author introduces the following argument.
It appears that most lodges, especially the Masonic lodges, discriminate racially, even as they freely admit unanimous consent is necessary for any candidate to be entered into the craft. Negro Freemasonry started in the United States on March 6, 1775 in Boston. When the degrees of Masonry were conferred upon Prince Hall and 14 other black men in Military Lodge, number 441 on the Irish Register, in the English Army attached to the 38th Regiment. It is alleged that Prince Hall was born in Barbados, British West Indies, that he came to Boston and became leader of free Negroes of that city, and was ordained a minister. On September 29, 1784, the Grand Lodge of England issued a charter for African Lodge number 459 of Boston. It was instrumental in forming the first Negro Grand Lodge in the United States.
My response. It has been claimed that all men are free to make their own choices. Some call it free will, yet we are indissolubly linked to the manifested and occult world around us, the influence of which we cannot easily nor readily escape. It is then not surprising that human beings are in no small measure a reflection of the environment and society in which they live and evolve. Its influence is perceived in all the spheres of our own manifestation, physical, mental, and spiritual. Religion and Freemasonry have been around for several centuries, coexisting at different periods with ancient and recent slavery and racism. As a result, old scars can be found in the history of both Masons and clergy, caused by these terrible and despicable social scourges. In the Bible's Old Testament, we find passages which appear to support slavery and racism, while the New Testament does not categorically condemn it. In Exodus, we read that if a slave owner strikes a slave with a rod and the slave survives, there is no punishment, for the slave is the owner's property. In Deuteronomy, we read that if a Hebrew male slave willingly sells himself into bondage, he should be released after 6 years. But they also had the option to remain with his master out of love. In Ephesians and Colossians, we read,
"Slaves, obey your earthly master."
Also, as it is described in Genesis, after the great flood, Noah became drunk and lay naked in his tent. Ham, one of Noah's 3 sons, saw his father's nakedness and told his brothers, Shem and Japheth. In contrast to Ham's actions, Shem and Japheth covered Noah without looking at him. When Noah awoke and learned what Ham had done, he pronounced a curse on Canaan, Ham's son, declaring that Canaan would be a servant to his brothers. This passage, which is referred as Curse of Ham, has been misused throughout history to justify the enslavement of African people, falsely associating the curse with blackness. As it happens in the vast amount of world's religions, texts, and within the massive volume of Masonic literature during their many centuries of existence, it is possible that one could find a few phrases, verses, and passages which reflect a negative human tendency belonging to a long-gone period of time. Comparatively, there is a much larger number of positive and uplifting messages messages of love, unity, and care for our fellow man at the core of these two noble and time immemorial institutions. In the history of the world, we have seen some isolated men, or group of them, who have either mischievously or due to lack of knowledge, or even because their own misinformation, repeatedly misuse and abuse sacred and invaluable texts to mislead and confuse those of lower levels of awareness and consciousness. Be careful, because not everything is as it seems to be, nor all appears to be what they really are. Being able to examine concepts from different scopes, angles, and vantage points is a useful and powerful tool to the wise man. When How to Respond To suggests that Freemasonry is racist, while others have claimed that the prefix free in the word Freemasonry was added to exclude slaves. As I will soon explain, this statement is not factual information. But even if we assume this statement to be truthful, then undoubtedly, it serves to prove that our fraternity has never been a stagnant one, and that it has continuously self-evaluated with a progressive and continuous movement towards its own betterment, despite of having, like all human organizations, men who for their own selfish and private reasons cause unnecessary friction, and subsequently slowing down the forward motion of the order they profess to love. An example of this is actually given in Chapter 3 of the book, How to Respond To, when Prince Hall, a black man, was repeatedly refused by Boston Masons and therefore unable to join the Blue Lodge, yet it was the premier Grand Lodge of England, the very first Grand Lodge in existence, the one to grant him permission to not only join the Freemasons' rank, but actually to create his own Grand Lodge, which is still today active and vibrant, known as Prince Hall Freemasonry. It is quite telling and fascinating that it was the Grand Lodge of England, the one to empower a Negro to create his own Grand Lodge, giving him absolute authority to design his own brand of Freemasonry, despite of an irrefutable historical fact that this was the very same England, once practitioner of an unbelievably cruel and inhumane transatlantic trade of black Africans to the Caribbean islands, and one of the European countries that most benefited from a ruthless slavery system. This is evidence that even while some insist in grouping men by ethnicity, by geographic location, by language and creed, human beings are not monolithic, nor an homogeneous mass, but essentially an ever-changing entity, and that our attitudes, behaviors, and tendencies are amenable to positive change if each one develops the required fortitude of will to confront our innermost fears and crippling ego, the dweller on the threshold. Free were also the stonemasons of the Middle Ages, who as builders of the privileged class were absolved from taxes and servitude, being also free to travel about from town to town in times of feudal bondage. And during the rise of Gothic architecture, two classes of masons were found. The guild masons, who like the guild of carpenters, weavers, and merchants, were local in character and strictly dominated by law, and the free stonemasons, who could travel whenever and wherever there was need to design and erect those magnificent churches and cathedrals, which still stand today, inimitable in strength and beauty. Hence, these operative stonemasons were free of the restrictions of a guild and free of the locals' laws. From an esoteric viewpoint, the prefix free may represent another layer of interpretation. Freemasons are expected to be free thinkers. By this I mean open-minded, open consciousness, able to absorb new material, new information, and capable of assimilating concepts that offer a totally different approach to things which most men have already made their mind about. Free, because we ought to learn to rid ourselves of dogma, rigid, unflexible, and restrictive practices that curtail the expanding of our understanding. Free from the tyranny of ignorance, superstition, and oppression, a freedom to be attained by our pursuit of knowledge, wisdom, and enlightenment. As Masons, we ought to attain the freeness to comprehend that there is an innate divine spark deposited by the great architect of the universe within us, a direct connection to Him, one that, as long as our labors in the quarries of the world are square and thus pleasing in the eyes of God, will keep this congenital flame alive and thriving, thereby making us plenipotentiary. Created and narrated by Brother Dr. Aya Ramos, Past Master, Lodge Caledonian, number 554 in Jamaica, under the Scottish Constitution.
Next chapter, Salvation in the Lodge.